Hello everyone, I'm Claire from Susan's family. Today I'll teach you the knitting method for the Star Moon Yoke sweater. For this electronic tutorial, you can visit our website and search for susud.com to check it out. This sweater consists of the collar, shoulder parts, body, and hem, sleeves and decorations. First, knit the shoulder parts from top to bottom. Then the body and hem. After completing these parts, pick up stitches separately for the collar and sleeves. Finally, add the decorations. Let's start with the method for knitting the shoulder parts. Use the cable cast-on method to begin. Work in rounds to create the intarsia pattern. Now let's look at the chart. One square represents one stitch. The casting on method and number of stitches are marked below the chart. The fabric is worked in rounds. Each round's chart is read from right to left. The round numbers are marked on the right side of the chart. Blank squares in the diagram represent knit stitches. You'll need to increase stitches evenly during the process. This includes LI and RLI. The shoulder parts are worked in rounds with an intarsia pattern. Different colors of squares in the chart indicate various colors. Match the corresponding colors. Now, let's show. Start by casting on. For your convenience to see more clearly, I will demonstrate using cotton yarn. The color scheme is random for specific yarn, color choices, and needle sizes. Please refer to the detail page of our product and the paper instructions. Make a slip knot with the yarn. Place it on the knitting needle. Pick up another straight needle with your right hand. Position it above the yarn. Insert into the loop. Knit one stitch. Transfer the loop to the left needle. Continue casting on. Place the right needle above the thread. Insert downwards between these two stitches. Knit the stitch. Place it on the left needle. Continue knitting and casting on at the same time. Refer to the chart for the exact stitch count. Five stitches. 6 stitches. Everyone, take a look. The casting on is done. The actual stitch count will be higher. Be mindful to prevent the loops from falling off on both sides. Start knitting the first round. First, evenly divide the stitches on the straight needle among 3 needles. Now they are all divided. Form the needles into a triangle. Be careful not to twist the bottom. Start knitting from the position of the yarn tail. Take out the 4th needle. Since we're knitting in rounds, the chart is always read from right to left. The first round consists of only spaces. This means you'll knit all stitches. Place the right needle above the yarn. Insert into the first loop. Knit 1 stitch. Here is the boundary between 2 needles. Tighten the yarn tail. Otherwise, the finished product won't look nice. This is the first stitch. The yarn tail at the starting position also needs to be tightened. Continue knitting the knit stitches. You can see it's a braid-like texture. Knit all stitches in this round. Finish knitting the loops on this needle. After completing, you reach the boundary. Continue knitting knit stitches. Pay attention to the junction of the needles. The first stitch needs to be tightened. Continue knitting downward. Keep going until you finish all the loops on the needle to the right of the yarn tail. Everyone, look, we have now reached the position of the yarn tail. The first round is completed. Continue knitting knit stitches in the second round. The method is identical to the first round. You can finish them on your own. Start knitting the jacquard pattern from the third round. For the jacquard round, you need 2 colors of yarn. Alternate knitting the jacquard pattern. When knitting, the number of identical color squares on the chart indicates how many stitches you knit with the corresponding yarn in the corresponding stitch. For convenience while knitting, we can use both hands to carry the yarn. For different jacquard patterns, the knitting method is the same. Here, I'll demonstrate with this small sample. Carry the yarn with your left and right hands, and knit the jacquard pattern in the round. The sample's jacquard pattern and color scheme are random. Here, we only explain the method. You can first watch my demonstration, and then knit according to the corresponding chart. Let's call the color of the yarn you're currently knitting with, color 1. If the next stitch requires switching colors, take out color 2, leaving about a 10 cm yarn tail. Tie a knot on color 1. Tighten it, and move it to the base of color 1. This knot for joining the yarn should be on the wrong side of the piece. Make sure it doesn't show on the right side. For any future situations where you need to join yarn, you can use this method for joining. Start knitting the intarsia pattern from here. For the current round, if there are more stitches, hold the working yarn with your right hand. Hang the yarn with fewer stitches on your left hand. Everyone can decide based on their own situation, and hold the yarn in either the left or right hand while knitting. Here, I have color 1 hanging on my right hand, and color 2 hanging on my left hand. Wrap color 2 once around the little finger of your left hand. Pass it through between the middle finger and index finger. Place this yarn above the index finger. Hold the left needle with the remaining fingers of your left hand. When doing intarsia in even stitch, there are 2 scenarios. If color 1 and color 2 continue to knit a small number of stitches, if it's no more than 5 stitches, you can just switch colors and knit directly. Start by knitting 1 stitch with color 2. When knitting, keep color 2 always underneath color 1. Insert the right needle into the stitch loop. With your left hand, place color 2 from below upwards to the left side of the needle. Wrap the yarn around and pick up with the right needle. 1 knit stitch is done. Continue with color 1 for 3 more knit stitches. Use color 2 to knit 2 stitches. Stretch the fabric piece a little. I'll demonstrate a few more stitches moving forward. Don't forget after switching colors. To stretch the fabric piece, keep the piece flat. I won't repeat the instructions for what comes after. This means the number of consecutive stitches should not exceed 5 stitches. It's the method of alternating colors directly while knitting. When the number of stitches for one contrasting color yarn is continuous, equal to or more than 5 stitches, because the interval distance is longer, after every 2 to 3 stitches, you need to carry the other yarn along. I'll continue with this sample swatch and demonstrate the technique for carrying the yarn. Start with 1 knit stitch using color 2. Then do 7 knit stitches using color 1. First, work 3 stitches. On the 4th stitch, carry the yarn. Insert the needle into the loop first. Place the yarn tail of color 2 on the right side of the needle. Continue to yarn over and draw through with your right hand. Finish this stitch. You can check the wrong side of the fabric now. Color 2 has been carried to the correct position. Continue with color 1 to finish the remaining 3 stitches. Let me demonstrate it one more time. Start with 1 knit stitch using color 2. Then do 7 knit stitches using color 1. First, work 3 stitches. Carry color 2 on the 4th stitch. Insert into the loop. Place the tail of color 2 on the right side of the needle. Yarn over and draw through with your right hand. Finish this stitch. Complete the stitch while carrying the yarn. Continue to finish the remaining 3 stitches. Next, I'll demonstrate a few more stitches. Pay attention that color 2 should always stay underneath color 1. This is the method for continuous knitting with the yarn on your right hand for over 5 stitches. The way to carry the yarn on your left hand while knitting. During the process of knitting, if the number of stitches to be knitted continuously with the yarn in the left hand is large, you need to carry the yarn from your right hand. I will continue demonstrating using this sample swatch. Knit 7 stitches with color 2. Knit the first 3 stitches. For the 4th stitch, carry color 1. First, loop color 1 up from below to the straight needle. Then, wrap color 2 around the straight needle. After that, bring color 1 back around. Finish this knit stitch. Complete while carrying the yarn. Finish knitting the remaining 3 stitches with color 2. I'll demonstrate it one more time. Knit 1 stitch with color 1. Then knit 7 stitches with color 2. Knit the first 3 stitches. For the fourth stitch, carry the yarn. Finish knitting the remaining 3 stitches. This is the method when there are more stitches on the left hand. The way to carry the yarn for the right hand. Let's take a look at the carrying pattern here. For color changes over long distances with 5 or more stitches, carry the yarn once every 2 to 3 stitches. Bring the yarn to a proper position. There's no need to carry the yarn when there are fewer than 5 stitches apart. If you're switching colors at a long distance, at the start of a round, you can also follow this method. Bring the yarn to the corresponding position before knitting. When carrying yarn with both hands separately, normally, these 2 threads won't wrap together. If while knitting, the yarns cross, make sure to untangle them promptly. After carrying the yarn, be sure to stretch the fabric piece in time. Prevent carrying the yarn too tight, or too loose, as it may affect the appearance. During the knitting process, if you're working with a contrasting color, it won't be used again until more than 10 rounds passed. You can simply leave a 10 cm tail, and fasten off the yarn. Weave in the yarn tails along the texture of the wrong side of the fabric later. When you reach the joining position, continue following the previous method, and tie a knot on the remaining tail to join the yarn. If you're using a contrasting color, if the number of rounds between intervals is less than 10, there's no need to cut the yarn. Just carry it to the corresponding position while knitting. I'll demonstrate with this small sample. The method of carrying yarn between rounds. Place color 2 temporarily at the back of the swatch. Join color 3. For the next 2 rounds, alternate between color 1 and color 3. Now knit the 3rd round. Carry color 2 along while working this round. Before starting the first stitch, cross color 2 with the corresponding contrasting color once. Take a look at the wrong side of the fabric. Color 2 has been carried to this position. Continue knitting 2 rounds with color 1 and color 3. Leave color 2 at the back of the swatch. Let's take a look at the pattern for carrying yarn between rounds. Carry the yarn once in the first stitch after every 2 rounds. There's no need to carry it in every round. Just carry the yarn to the corresponding round. Up to this point, both hands are used for carrying yarn. The method for stranded color work in the round is now complete. Increasing stitches is required when knitting the shoulder parts. I will demonstrate the method for increasing stitches using a sample swatch. Let's start with the RLI. Pick up the strand below this stitch on the right side of the chain braid. Knit 1 knit stitch. After completing it, insert the hook into the same loop and continue. Knit 1 knit stitch. That completes the RLI. Take a look at the texture below. 2 loops are created within one chain braid. This corresponds to 2 squares on the chart. During stranded color work, you may encounter an increase placement, where the 2 corresponding squares are different colors. This means the increased stitch should be worked with a different yarn material than the loop above it. I'll demonstrate again with a different color. The method for knitting the RLI. Pick up strands with the right needle. Work 1 knit stitch using the contrasting color that matches the right square. Then pick up this stitch. Work 1 knit stitch using the contrasting color that matches the left square. That completes the RLI. And these 2 loops correspond to 2 different contrasting colors. Besides the RLI, you will also encounter the LLI. I'll continue to demonstrate with this sample. First, work 1 knit stitch. Then find the right needle. Look for the second braid below this stitch. With the left needle, pick up 1 strand on the left side of the second braid. Work 1 knit stitch. This is the added stitch. 1 LLI is now complete. Take a look at the texture below. 1 stitch has been added from the left side of the loop. I'll demonstrate a LLI stitch in a different color. First, work 1 knit stitch with the contrasting color yarn. Then, pick up a strand with the left needle. Work 1 knit stitch with another contrasting color. That completes a LLI stitch in a different color. This is the method for working RLI and LLI stitches. When increasing stitches while knitting the shoulder parts later. According to the different situations on the chart, simply use the corresponding contrasting color yarn to work the required increase method. Simply use the corresponding color. After knitting several rounds, when the length of one round exceeds the length of the circular needle, you can switch to using a circular needle for knitting. Please refer to the chart for the specific needle size. Let's first get familiar with the circular needle. It connects the ends of 2 straight needles. The tips are the same as regular straight needles. You don't need to switch needles frequently while knitting. It's more convenient to use. Hold one end of the circular needle with your right hand, depending on the specific intarsia pattern. Hang the corresponding yarns with both hands. Follow the chart below and knit stitch by stitch to create the intarsia pattern and stitch techniques. Pay attention while knitting. Don't pull the carrying yarn too tight at the back. When the number of stitches skipped is large, you need to carry the yarn across. After completing each carry, stretch the fabric piece and the carried yarn slightly. Continue knitting one round following this method. Gradually replace all straight needles as you go. After finishing one round, the straight needles should also be swapped out. When starting the next round, Keep in mind, you need to place a stitch marker on the right needle first to mark the starting position. If you don't have a stitch marker, you can use a paperclip or safety pin as a substitute. When you finish knitting the loops to the right of the marker, it indicates that one full round is complete. When starting the next round, continue moving the stitch marker to the right needle. Repeat this process, and continue referring to the charts for the remaining part of the shoulder sections. Knit according to the pattern. The technique for shaping the shoulders is complete. Next, we'll move on to knitting the body and hems. Pay attention here, you need to change the needle size for knitting. Start by dividing into front and back pieces and sleeves. Then, at the corresponding position on the back piece, knit back and forth in even stitch. This creates the difference between the front and back. Once completed, continue to knit the body and hem in rounds. After everything is done, bind off using the single rib stitch method. There's one thing everyone should pay attention to. The back piece's front-back difference is created by knitting back and forth. However, the chart reflects what you see from the right side. So when knitting in practice, you need to knit the opposite stitch on the wrong side. The new stitch used here is the purl stitch and the M1BL. Now, please watch as I demonstrate the specific knitting method. Let's start by dividing the sections. I'll demonstrate using this sample swatch. The sample has fewer stitches and rounds. The pattern is random. This is just to demonstrate the technique. With the right side of the fabric facing you, neckline down. The side with the yarn tail on the right is the left sleeve, and the side with the yarn tail on the left is the back piece. First, cast off the loops corresponding to the left sleeve. That means temporarily threading the loops. Pause the knitting here. You can cut a piece of spare yarn from home. Thread it into a darning needle. Slip the loops off. The exact number of stitches is marked on the chart. The stitch count for the swatch is random. After completing, remove the sewing needle. Tie a loose knot with the two yarn tails. The loops that are cast off belong to the left sleeve. Count down from the yarn tail on the left to find the corresponding number of stitches for the back piece. Place a marker. Continue counting the corresponding number of stitches for the right sleeve. Place a marker. The remaining part is the front piece. The stitch count for the front and back pieces is identical. My swatch has fewer stitches here. Pay attention when actually dividing. Allocate the stitch count based on the specific situation of the jacquard pattern. Be careful not to divide at the wrong position. Next, we'll knit the difference position between the front and back. Let's start with row 1. This row is worked on the right side. Knit all stitches as knit stitches. Continue until just before the position marked by the stitch marker. After completing, on the left side, place the corresponding number of loops for the right sleeve on hold. Row 1 is now complete. Next, let's knit row 2. This row is worked on the wrong side. Turn your workpiece. View the chart from left to right. All symbols are for knit stitches. Here, you'll knit the opposite stitch. Knit all stitches as purl. Place the right needle below the yarn. Work 1 purl stitch. Purl all stitches for this row. After finishing this row, row 2 is complete. Continue downward. For the remaining positions of the front and back difference, knit all stitches on the right side. Purl all stitches on the wrong side. Everyone follow this method. Refer to the chart, and knit the remaining rows for the front and back difference position. End on the last row with the wrong side facing. Up to this point, the knitting method for the front and back difference position is complete. Next, we'll knit the body. I'll continue demonstrating with this sample swatch. Start with the first round. The yarn tail is currently on the right side of the back piece. Knit the knit stitch on the right side. Complete the corresponding position of the back piece. After finishing, proceed with M1BL. Place your right index finger above the yarn. Wrap it clockwise in a circle. Slip this loop onto the needle. Slightly tighten. This is the M1BL. Now 1 stitch has been added. For my sample, I'm using 6 stitches as an example. Refer specifically to the corresponding chart. Continue adding stitches downward. Pay attention not to pull the yarn tail too tight. 2, 3. No matter how many stitches you add here, when half of the stitches are added, place a marker on the loop. Then continue adding stitches. The sample stitch increase is done. Next, start knitting the front piece. All stitches are knit stitches. After finishing the front piece, continue to add stitches using the M1BL method. When half of the stitches are added, don't forget to place a stitch marker on the loop as a mark. After adding the corresponding number of stitches, place a stitch marker on any braid below the left needle. Mark the position of the first round. This makes it convenient to count rounds later. The first round is now complete. Then move on to the second round. Before knitting, first, place a stitch marker on the right needle. This marks the starting position. Then start knitting directly from the back piece position. All stitches are knit stitches. After finishing this round, pay attention when knitting at the M1BL increase points. The distance between the two needles should not be too far apart. This prevents the transition strand from becoming too long. The texture will not be even. If during the knitting process, a loop accidentally falls off the left needle, you can take the short segment of yarn between these two needles and wrap it clockwise in a circle from the middle. Then place this loop back onto the left needle. This way, the loop is restored. Continue knitting them down. The second round is now complete. For the remaining part of the body, knit in stocking stitch in rounds. That is, knit all stitches without increasing or decreasing. The exact number of rounds is not fixed. Knit until you reach the corresponding length. All the stitch techniques have been demonstrated before. Please refer to those previous demonstrations. Follow the chart to complete it. Once the body part is completed, move on to knitting the hem. Starting from the ending position of the body, knit the single rib pattern in rounds. I'll demonstrate the method for knitting single rib with a sample swatch. The first stitch is the knit stitch symbol. Knit 1 stitch. The second stitch is the purl stitch symbol. You need to purl this stitch. First, bring the yarn to the top of the needle. Purl 1 stitch. Then comes another knit stitch symbol. Knit the stitch. Return the yarn to the bottom. Note: when switching from a purl stitch to a knit stitch, you must bring the yarn down. Otherwise, you'll end up with an extra stitch. This is the third stitch. Next, purl the following stitch. First, bring the yarn to the top. Whenever you purl in the future, the yarn should always be on top. Let's take a look at the stitch pattern here. It consists entirely of one knit stitch and one purl stitch alternately. This stitch technique is called single rib. You can see that, at the bottom, there is a chain and a tile shape alternating. This is the texture of the single rib. Note: when switching from a purl stitch to a knit stitch, you must bring the yarn to the bottom. Continue following this method to finish the remaining part of the hem. The exact number of rounds is not fixed. Just knit until you reach the corresponding length. After completing the hem, you need to use the single rib bind off method to secure all the loops. Please watch the demonstration. After everything is completely done, proceed with the single rib bind off. First, knit 2 stitches in the opposite texture from what's underneath. Here, the first stitch below is a braid. The second stitch below is a horizontal line. So start with 1 purl stitch, then do 1 knit stitch. Then cover the first stitch over the second one. This way you've bound off 1 stitch. Continue knitting 1 stitch in the opposite texture from what's underneath. Here it's a braid, so you should do 1 purl stitch. Before stitching, use your left hand to pinch the bottom of the yarn loop on the right needle. Take the needle out. Place it below the yarn, then thread it back through the loop. Then do a purl stitch. And cover the first stitch over the second one. This way, you've bound off another stitch. Continue knitting 1 stitch in the opposite texture from what's underneath. Here it's a horizontal line, so you should do 1 knit stitch. Before stitching, take the needle out, place it above the yarn, then thread it back through the loop. Do 1 knit stitch. And cover the first stitch over the second one. This way, you've bound off another stitch. Every time, you need to knit in the opposite texture from what's underneath, and before stitching, you must change the position of the yarn by moving the right needle. When doing a purl stitch, the yarn stays on top. When knitting a stitch, the yarn goes below. We'll continue binding them off. When only one loop is left, leave the yarn tail slightly longer. Secure the loop. Finally, you can use this yarn tail to sew the beginning and ending together. Ensuring there are no obvious notches. This completes the single rib bind off. Up to this point, the method for knitting the body has been fully explained. Next, we'll knit the sleeves. Let's take a look at the finished product. The methods for knitting the left and right sleeves are identical. They are divided into two parts, the sleeve body and the cuff edge. Pick up stitches along the position of the sleeve cap. Start by working even stitch for the pattern. After completing the corresponding length, knit the jacquard pattern. For the cuffs, you need to decrease stitches in the first round, then knit the single rib pattern. Please watch as I demonstrate the specific knitting method. Here, I will continue to use this small sample for the demonstration. Start with the right sleeve first. Place the previously rested loops back onto the straight needle. Slide them onto the needle specifically. For the exact needle size, please refer to the chart. Insert into the loops from right to left. The sample has fewer stitches. In practice, you'll need to reserve more stitches. Place them roughly on about 2 straight needles. Position the loops in the middle. Then start picking up stitches from the increase point of the M1BL. Here, I will continue to demonstrate with cotton yarn. The color scheme is random. For specifics, please refer to the diagram. Tie the yarn tail into a loose knot. You can see that the increase points of the M1BL form rows of braids. We pick above each row of braids. These are the 2 crossed strands. Take out the third straight needle. Insert it into the loop position marked by the stitch marker, that is, above this row of braids, where there are these 2 strands. Pick up the loop with the knot. Adjust the loop size a bit. This is the first stitch of the sleeve body. Then insert the straight needle above the left row of braids, where there are these 2 strands. Yarn over and draw through. This is the second stitch. Pick up one more stitch. The sample has added 6 stitches in total. Half of the stitches have already been picked up here. Now we're at the side edge of the back piece. You can see there will be a row of braids, like this on the side. Each row corresponds to one braid. We insert the needle into the braid on the side and pick up the stitch. The first stitch is now picked up. Pay attention, the yarn tail of the first stitch can be tightened a bit to avoid having too large a hole here. Pick up one stitch from the braid on the left side. Then pick up one stitch corresponding to the next braid. Finish picking up stitches along this edge. After completing, knit into the position of the previously held stitch loops. Take out the fourth knitting needle and start knitting. Similarly, the first stitch needs to be pulled tighter. Continue knitting them all the way down. After knitting the stitch loops at the held position, continue picking up an M1BL for the remaining half. Pick up the corresponding number of stitches. Up to this point, the picking up of stitches for the sleeve body is completed. The number of stitches in my sample swatch is relatively small. Refer to the chart for the actual number of stitches to pick up. Next, you can adjust the position of the loops. Distribute them roughly evenly across 3 needles. Pay attention, do not move the first and last stitch loops. Place a stitch marker underneath the third needle. Knit the loops on this needle above the stitch marker. This indicates the end of one complete round. The first round is now completed. Continue knitting the entire sleeve body in even stitch without increasing or decreasing. At the corresponding round number, join yarn to knit the matching intarsia pattern. Everyone can refer to the chart to finish knitting the remaining part of the sleeve body. Now I will show you how to count rounds here. Start counting from the chain stitch above the last placed stitch marker. Begin counting from the braid above the previous marker. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do not count the loops on the needle. This indicates that 4 rounds have been completed. When counting the rounds of the sleeve body, do not count the loops on the needle. Everyone can follow this method while knitting. To confirm the number of rounds, refer to the chart for the exact number of rounds. My sample has fewer rounds here. After the sleeve body is completed, then knit the cuff edge. Let's take a look at the finished product. The cuff is knitted in single rib stitch pattern. The first round requires decreasing stitches. It uses the K2 tog and the P2 tog. Please watch the stitch technique demonstration. First, learn the K2 tog, shortened as K2 tog. While knitting, insert the right needle from left to right, passing through these two loops at the same time. And knit one stitch. This completes the K2 tog. You can notice that the left loop is above the right loop. For purl stitches, it's the P2 tog, shortened as P2 tog. When knitting, insert the right needle from right to left through the two loops on the left needle. And purl one stitch. That completes the P2 tog. You can see that the left loop is on top. Let me demonstrate it again. Insert the right needle through the two loops on the left needle. And purl one stitch. This is the method for the P2 tog. After completing the decrease, work even in single rib stitch. Finally, bind off all loops using the single rib stitch method. The method is identical to the one used for the hem. Please refer to the previous demonstration. Refer to the chart and complete them. This concludes the explanation of the right sleeve knitting method. The left sleeve is worked in the same way as the right sleeve. First, thread the held loops back onto the straight needle. I have already done this step in advance here. After completing, take out the yarn tail of the new yarn. And the third straight needle. First, at the increase position for M1BL, start picking up stitches from the marked loop with the stitch marker. Pick up half the number of stitches required for the whip stitch increase. Then work knit stitches on the loops on the straight needle. Pay attention to pulling the first stitch tight. Next, pick up stitches along the side seam of the back piece. The number of stitches picked up should refer to the chart. Finally, pick up the remaining half of the stitches at the M1BL position. After picking up all the stitches, adjust the loops so they are evenly distributed. Mindful when adjusting, Keep the position of the first stitch and the last stitch unchanged. Place a stitch marker underneath the third straight needle. The following knit technique is identical to that of the right sleeve. It's a rather simple method. Everyone can refer to the pattern chart to finish them. This is the knitting method for the left sleeve. Up to this point, the explanation of the sleeve knitting method is complete. Lastly, we will make the collar and decorations. Let's take a look at the finished product. The collar starts with casting on at the shoulder parts. After picking up stitches, knit single ribbing pattern in rounds. Aside from a different method of picking up stitches, the knitting technique is identical to that of the hem. Finally, use the single ribbing bind off method to close the loops. Let's take a look. The cast on position at the shoulder part looks like these loops. Each loop corresponds to a column of chains. The collar is knitted by picking up these loops. Note that the number of picked up stitches for the collar is fewer than the number of loops. Refer to the pattern chart for the picking up rule. Start from any position on the back piece. Pick up the corresponding number of stitches evenly. Knit the collar in rounds. Here, pick up the loops and distribute them onto 3 straight needles like this. Take a look, everyone. This is what the sample collar looks like after picking up the stitches. Continue knitting downward with 1 stitch corresponding to 1 stitch in single rib pattern. Refer to the chart for the exact number of rounds. After completing it, follow the method demonstrated earlier to weave in all the yarn tails. If the hole near the yarn tail is too large while weaving in, sew a couple of stitches first, and then weave in the yarn tail. Up to this point, the demonstration of the collar knitting method is now complete. Next, let's add decorations. Let's take a look at the finished product. Between the moon motifs on the shoulder parts, embroider star patterns. Here, I'll demonstrate the embroidery method using a sample swatch. The pattern shapes on the swatch are random. This is just to demonstrate the technique. You can watch the demonstration first and then embroider while referring to the chart. Here, I'll use a small sample to demonstrate. This is the method for creating the parts of the intarsia pattern that need embroidery. Refer to the chart and mark the spots that need embroidery. Take out the corresponding yarn. On the right side, follow the braid-like texture and embroider the braids. Mind not to pull the thread too tight. Try to cover the color of the braid underneath as much as possible. When embroidering, keep the threading order consistent. Keep the fabric piece flat. After completion, tie a knot on the wrong side, and weave in the ends. Up to this point, the method for making the decorations has been fully explained. The knitting technique for this sweater has also been fully explained. If you have any questions during the process, don't hesitate to reach us via our website. Susan's Family, supporting your handwork experience, sharing the joy of life. Thank you all for watching. See you in the next episode.